Hi there, Shane O'Grady is my name. I'm a senior lecturer at accountancyschool.ie, and this presentation is in relation to the strategic business leader. And we've received an awful lot of questions over the last number of months about the upcoming strategic business leader exam, and we hope that this presentation will help to answer a lot of those questions for you. So first of all, when does the strategic business leader come into effect? And the short answer is September 2018. So you may know this already, so apologies for those who do, but you must have passed both P1 and P3 before September 2018, and that means no later than the June 2018 exam in order to be exempt from the Strategic Business Leader exam. And unfortunately, there's going to be no exceptions or special cases or extenuating circumstances. You must have passed both. June 2018 is the last chance for you to pass both, or if you have one of the exams outstanding. And unfortunately, even if you have passed one of them and you've passed it handsomely, you might have even scored a very high grade in either P1 or P3. If you haven't passed the other paper, then you will not gain an exemption and you will have to do the Strategic Business Leader exam from September 2018 onwards. So what is the Strategic Business Leader? Well, as part of the introduction, I suppose you figured it out, that it really is the subject to replace P1 and P3 because they will no longer be part of the ACCA qualification process in the future. It's a compulsory subject and it does comprise some of the content from P1 and P3 has been brought forward, but there are also some significant new topics as well. I'm a very experienced P1 and P3 tutor. In fact, I've been tutoring both P1 and P3 since they were introduced as new subjects back in 2007. And on my analysis of the syllabus, I would suggest that 50% of the topics are brought forward from the old P3, 35% of the topics are brought forward from P1, and then about 15% of the topics on the new syllabus are also new topics. We haven't encountered those before in P1 or P3. Now, that doesn't mean that just 50% of P3 has been brought forward. In fact, a lot more of P3 has been brought forward than P1. It's just when you look at the makeup of the SBL syllabus, that will kind of be the breakdown. So, what are those topics? What are the Strategic Business Leader topics? Well, what I've tried to do in this particular slide, it's no accident that the font size differs per topic, and these are kind of the headline topics as per the study guide, which you'll find on our website on the SBL page. The professional skills are actually 20% of the total marks. And I suppose this is the new term that the ACCA are using in contrast to what we used to call the professional marks, which you would be familiar with from the other P-level papers, which invariably was only 4 marks on the paper. The professional skills as part of SBL are going to be 20% of the marks on the paper. So that's, really the largest part or the largest topic that's on the course is ensuring that you're answering your questions in a very professional way, and I'll be going on to that next. Then I would suggest to you that the next 2 largest topics are strategy, which would be the next largest after the professional skills. Then we have risk. And then there are 6 other topics which, in my opinion, there isn't maybe a major difference in the volume or the amount of study time that will be required in relation to those. So that's basically just a very quick overview of the topics that are there. Again, quite familiar in terms of people who might have some sort of experience of P1 and P3, but there are some new topics in there, in particular, I suppose, on this slide, technology and data analytics, and then innovation, performance, excellence, and change management. They certainly would be new, or they are certainly new labels in relation to syllabus topics as they would have applied to P1 and P3. So, is SBL effectively the same as P1 and P3 combined? Well, the short answer is no, it's not. There are some similar topics, as I've explained. Some of the topics from P3 and P1 are being brought forward, but there are also new topics. A couple of other key things that mean that it really is not just a simple case of P1 and P3 being combined together into one exam, is that the new exam is 4 hours long. So this is the longest exam that the ACCA have ever hosted in relation to their qualification process. It's 4 hours long. And also, on the basis of all of the information the ACCA provided to us so far, I personally have attended 2 ACCA tutor workshops, which were 2 days each, intermediate and advanced workshops in relation to the SBL. And on the basis of those insights and the specimen papers that are available for you to look at, we also need to know that the nature of the exam, not just the length of it, is different. So again, in contrast to what has happened before and what maybe might still apply to some of the P-level exams, there will be no questions which will basically just test your ability to regurgitate the knowledge. There will be no define questions, no distinguish, no describe, no explain. It's going to be a challenging exam because it's going to be all about applying your knowledge of the syllabus and of the individual topics. And in relation to the 20% professional marks, I suppose the mnemonic that's been used throughout the tutor community at the moment to describe that as what we're calling case. So there are 5 professional skills that you must demonstrate. There's up to 20% of the marks in the paper available for you demonstrating these in a very good way. Commercial acumen, so that would be things like prioritizing certain elements within your answer, identifying interdependencies, communication in terms of the persuasiveness of your answer and the way that you've actually laid it out and presented it, analysis by the way in which you've provided insights where information that hasn't exactly been laid out for you on a silver platter, you have managed to investigate and extract that very important information. Skepticism, I suppose, a really critical skill of an accountant, and particularly for those of you who have experience of the audit subjects or audit practitioners, very, very important to reserve judgment and to maybe investigate things a little bit more thoroughly before you would make a final recommendation. And then evaluation, I suppose, is the ability to, objectively review something that's in a case study and advise the organisation in the case study about the advantages and disadvantages or the costs and benefits that might be applicable in that scenario. So again, short answer, and I really think this is a very important thing to emphasise. It's not as simple a case as just P1 and P3 being combined and, kind of quite a similar exam format. There are really some fundamental differences that mean it's not just a simple case of P1 and P3 combined. Now, is the SBL more difficult than P1 and P3? Again, short answer, yes. However, it's not a situation where it's more difficult than both of those exams combined. So SBL is definitely, in my opinion, more difficult than doing P1 on its own. It's definitely more difficult than doing P3 on its own. But, it is only one exam. So it's one exam, whereas you would have had to do 2 3-hour exams, well, 2 3-hour and 15-minute exams to be precise, to pass P1 and P3. Now you do 1 4-hour exam. The breadth of the syllabus, therefore, makes it very challenging. So that's why I would suggest that the SBL is going to be the most difficult ACCA paper within the qualification process. There are no optional questions. So that's a very important distinction as well. So in addition to it being 4 hours long, there's no choice. And again, you may be familiar in relation to the P-level exams where there was a compulsory question 1 in section A, typically for 50 marks. And then there were 3 optional questions of 25 marks each in section B, of which you could select 2. That choice does not exist in SBL. So therefore, the lost marks that you might suffer if you're unable to answer certain questions, is going to be quite significant, because in the other type of exam formats, at least there was a possibility to not select that question. So the question where you felt you might struggle, you could say, okay, I'm going to choose the other 2. So that's just not going to be an option with this exam. And then one of the things that even myself, if I was going back into the examination process, I would certainly have to sit down and consider how I would prepare myself for the inevitable fatigue and tiredness that will creep in when you are basically heading from the 3rd hour of the exam and onwards. So up until now, we've only been tested as far as 3 hours and 15 minutes, and that's an important thing to consider as well. It's not insurmountable. I suppose you could use an analogy. For somebody who maybe has, taken up running, they have run comfortably a certain distance, maybe let's say a 10K, and then the next thing they want to maybe try and do is take on a half marathon or something like that. It's just going to be a question of practice and making sure that they're in a position to not just complete a 3 hour and 15-minute exam, but you are able to actually then continue to perform for another 45 minutes and generate more and more marks to ensure that you do indeed pass. Now, one very important thing for me to emphasize at this stage is this is not just my opinion, and people might feel that tuition providers would have a certain perspective in relation to issues like this. The ACCA themselves, in the SBL syllabus and study guide, do stipulate, and I've quoted it here for you, in broad terms it is recommended education providers and students, so that's you, should spend 50% more learning time in preparation for this examination than normally required for other exams at this level. So it is something very, very important from the outset. Make sure you approach the SBL with the right type of understanding, the right type of attitude, and the right type of commitment. So again, just to illustrate it, however many hours or what other metrics you might use in terms of effort that you might have to employ to be able to pass the strategic business reporting paper, which is effectively the updated P2 paper, or indeed the options P4, P5, P6 and P7, those on their own are going to be less than SBL on its own. So again, to reiterate, there's no doubt that SBL is significantly more of a challenge than any of the other papers, particularly at the essential or options level, and it's just important that you approach the paper with that in mind. So, last thing in relation to it being perhaps a little bit more difficult than P1 on its own or P3 on its own, I don't think it's as difficult as doing P1 and P3, for example, in the one sitting, as many students used to do before the 4 sittings a year became more established. There is actually some positives to take from it. And one of them is that the length of the exam means that when you work it out, you actually have more minutes per mark. Because P1 and P3 were both 3-hour, 15-minute exams on their own, which meant, just now dividing them in a pure sense, you had 1.95 minutes per mark. Now we're setting aside the time that you might use for your reading, planning and reflection time. The SBL is also a 100-mark paper, but you 4 hours. So that's actually 2.4 minutes per mark. Now, you may need to, spend, but not maybe disproportionately, so if you had spent maybe 30 minutes reading and planning and reflecting in terms of your time for P1 or P3, you might need to spend 45 minutes doing that for the strategic business leader. So proportionately, I think the reading, planning and reflection time will be the same, but you do actually have more time for the 100 marks. And crucially, remember that 20% of the marks are actually for professional skills. So there isn't an actual, writing task that is required for you to get to professional skills. And just to illustrate that very quickly, if you have a task which says, I want you to prepare 2 PowerPoint slides for the chief executive to present at the next board meeting, explaining the new product that the company are going to launch and the benefits that it believes it will bring to the company. And let's say that task is 8 marks, 4 marks for each slide. You might also get 2 professional marks for producing those 2 slides in a way that is very professional in terms of communication. So in terms of those professional skills, one of which is communication, if student A prepares those 2 slides and they do actually satisfy the requirement for the 8 marks, but they're not persuasively presented and they're not laid out well and they're not succinct, etc., well then they might not gain any marks in relation to the professional skills for communication. Whereas student B, not having spent any more time, it doesn't take them any more time in terms of their time budget, has also achieved the 8 marks, but because they have communicated it in a very professional way, they also get the extra 2 marks as well. And they're doing that not by allocating any more time to the task. So I think that is a positive thing to take on board. And again, to reiterate, It is more difficult than P1 doing P1 on its own or P3 on its own, but maybe not as difficult as doing both of those papers, perhaps in the one sitting, which some students used to do. So, in relation to what course you should consider doing, the first sitting, as I explained, is September 2018. In accountancyschool.ie, what we're offering and what courses that I will be the tutor on are September 2018, and then we have two courses for December 18, an early start course and a late start course. Now let's start with September 2018, because some people have been postponing doing P1 or P3 because they felt that there wasn't enough sittings left for them to be absolutely sure they could pass both of them, and they've been doing some of the other P-level papers. So now maybe their last exam that they need to do to actually qualify is the strategic business leader. So we do actually have maybe people waiting, kind of like a coiled spring, ready to do this exam in September. And what we basically have here is an outline of the way we're going to approach this. So let's imagine you finish your exams on Friday the 8th of June. That's the end of the exam week in June. At that stage, you would be well entitled to take some well-earned time off to maybe, relax and, maybe reacquaint yourself with your friends in your social life, etc. And then, hopefully, full of vim and vigour, you would arrive into us and we would start basically our SBL course for September 2018 on Tuesday the 19th of June. And the basic idea as we go through that, there are milestones along the way. We obviously have a progress test about 1 month after we start the course. The revision course then starts in the middle of August. After the revision course we have the mock exam, and then the actual first exam itself is on Tuesday the 4th of September. So this is an ideal course for students who fall into that category whereby you want to do the SBL shortly after you've completed the exams in the June sitting, and you have decided that that's what appeals to you. Some people, this will not be for them, but we have other courses that will suit you. You want to take your summer off, and that's absolutely fine. So this is basically 2 evenings per week, and to accommodate the fact that it is going on through the summer, there are minimal weekend classes in this particular course. There is a half day on one Saturday morning on the 15th of July for a progress test. There is one Saturday where we have to effectively do a double class, so a 3-hour class before lunch and a 3-hour class after lunch. And then there is a weekend as part of our revision up around the end of August, a Saturday and a Sunday. Now, having said that, maybe many of you will say, well, this is actually really moot, because I am aware that accountancyschool.ie live streams and records all of its classes. So you as a student can effectively create your own timetable. You can decide when to start. You can decide what evenings or at what rate you want to attend the lectures, and do that in an online manner. So you can create your own start date and timetable. But for people who maybe want to attend a face-to-face course, and some people do like that in terms of the discipline and rigour involved, that is available for you. Okay, the December 2018 early start is the second course that we will be offering. Now, this is obviously for the December exam, and this is ideal for students who have, received their results, and the results for the June exams will come out on Monday, the 16th of July. And hopefully, if those results, go your way, you might decide that you are not going to do, or not going to have to do any exams in September 2018. It wouldn't really be possible, I would suggest, at this stage, having got results on the 16th of July, to be able to prepare yourself in time for doing the SBL in September. So, if you have done exams in June, you got your results on the 16th of July, and you don't have to maybe repeat one of those subjects in September, this is perhaps the ideal course for you if you're going to try and do the SBL in December. So your results are on the 16th of July. Just take a good month off to celebrate, and then we would start on Wednesday the 15th of August with our early start course for December. This is 1 evening per week. There are some weekend classes in order for us to cover all of the topics properly, and as I mentioned in the previous slide, all the classes are live streamed and recorded, so you are not a slave to this particular timetable. There is the ability for you to be as flexible as you need to be in terms of work commitments, or if there are certain events that means you're going to actually miss a class, there's always the ability for you to catch up with classes online. And the last course that we're going to offer in 2018 is a late start course. Now, why would we late start? Late start, nearly, some people would think maybe has some negative connotations. This is basically to facilitate students who are going to be doing exams in September 2018. So the September 2018 exam week finishes on Friday the 7th of September. Again, at that stage, I think everybody is entitled to maybe a little bit of a break and some time to recuperate. And then we will be starting our Strategic Business Leader Late Start course on Tuesday, the 18th of September. Now, in order for us to, I suppose you could say, make up for the fact that we are starting a little bit later, this is a little bit more intense in that it is 2 evenings per week. So the early start course starts earlier, and it is 1 evening a week, a Wednesday. This starts a little bit later, but it's, very good to accommodate people. You got your results in July, maybe not everything worked out the way you'd have liked to do, and we've all experienced that. You then do some exams in the beginning of September, and then you are in a position to do the late start course for SBL for December 2018. So 2 evenings per week, some weekend classes, and again, live streamed and recorded, so you have the same flexibility that I have previously mentioned. So how is our course structured? So I would suggest to you that we have these kind of 5 key aspects to the course. Obviously there are lectures. We will basically have 18 3-hour lectures in total, and they will help you to develop a thorough understanding of the topics so that it can be applied to the case study questions. And this is quite similar, I suppose, to all of the ACCA exams. That's what you're required to do. The only difference with the SBL, as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, is there's not going to be any questions or marks or credit, to use that expression, for you demonstrating an understanding of those topics in a describe, define, distinguish, explain type of manner. They are going to be a means to an end, and what you will be tested on and what you will get marks for is showing your ability to apply the understanding of the topics to a case study. Practice questions are absolutely crucial throughout all ACCA exams, but probably even more so for the SBL, and that's a huge part of our course, where you will basically be given certain questions at the end of each lecture, which you are to attempt yourself in realistic exam conditions, and then submit them to me, where I will basically correct them and give you individual feedback on what you're doing well and where maybe you need to improve. And it's one of the most valuable things that we can offer you. A particular lecture will take me, 3 hours to deliver that lecture. Depending on the number of students that are in the class and how many of them submit practice questions for correction, it's going to take me an awful lot longer than the 3 hours it took me to deliver the lecture to correct all of those individual questions and give you your feedback. So it's a really, really, valuable and critical part of how our course is structured and what has led us to achieving the very high pass rates that we enjoy. There is a progress test, which is something that I never did for P1 and P3, and the idea behind this is that there is just so much in this one particular subject that it would be really crucial for us to do a progress test, certainly no later than halfway through the course, to ensure that, if somebody has maybe fallen behind, or somebody, is operating under an assumption that mightn't actually be reflected in reality, that is something that is crystallized in a very, very succinct way no later than halfway through the course. And again, the progress test is something that is corrected, and it will give very valuable feedback to people in terms of how they're preparing themselves for the SBL exam. The revision course is then the second last element of how our course is structured, and this helps you to fine-tune your preparation. And a massive focus on the revision course obviously is revising via questions. So there will always be a little bit of revision to make sure that people are familiar with the topic, so that they have a reasonable chance of being able to apply it to the question that we do on the course. But the main focus is, okay, let's assume that you understand the theory which we have just revised, and let's apply that now to a question, and we repeat that process topic after topic on the revision course. It can be quite intense, but it does deliver very good results for people in terms of their exam preparation. And then the last element of our course is a mock exam. We try and facilitate people by having the mock exam on a variety of different evenings, and there are options to do it at home if you're not in a position to come in and do it in the exam conditions we provide here in the accountancy school. And it is a thing that we try and do after the revision course so that people can get a good benchmark of where they are in terms of preparation. The only difference being that the mock exam, in terms of speed of turnaround, it is marked rather than corrected. So it is marked, you're given your grade, and any feedback that you receive will actually be quite brief, in contrast to the very detailed and constructive feedback that you get the whole way through the course in terms of practice questions and the progress test. But if we have a mock exam and we have maybe 100 students doing the mock exam 2 weeks before the live exam, in order for me to turn around those mock exams in enough time to get them back to people, at that stage we were able to mark them rather than to be in a position to. Now, a couple of other key points that fall out of that structure. Accountancyschool.ie, we will be using the BPP Platinum approved materials on all of the courses for the SPL. There are only now 2 approved publishers, and we have chosen BPP. We have a long history and a lot of experience in using them, and we're very happy to use their material. I've been quite impressed with the inspection copies that I've received of both the study kit and the practice and revision kit. As I mentioned, the weekly homework given, corrected and returned, it's absolutely crucial. I can't emphasize it enough, in particular because of the nature of this new exam and the fact that it's effectively 1.5 subjects. As I would often say, in I suppose the most diplomatic way that I possibly can, I do worry when I see people communicating on bulletin boards, on online forums, and even maybe sometimes you might overhear ACCA students talking, and they would say, I'm practicing lots of questions, I'm practicing lots and lots of questions before the exam. My concern is, who's grading them, who's correcting them, and who's giving you feedback, and what is that feedback like? And if the answer to that is you, I would respectfully suggest that maybe you mightn't be the most objective or qualified person to be doing that. So, this is something that is incorporated into your fee. It's effectively, something you've already paid for. We do not charge extra for it, but it is amazing to me that many students do not, take the opportunity to get this individual one-to-one feedback. And again, the correlation between students who attempt most of the assignments, and even though many of those assignments might have an awful lot of issues to be addressed in the early part of the course, and students going on to comfortably pass exams, in contrast to students who, for whatever reason, don't really attempt any of the homework and then not passing the exams, that correlation is very, very strong. There is a much greater chance of you passing the exam and passing it comfortably if you put yourself, under a little bit of pressure, and once a week or twice a week, as it may apply, submit these questions, get the feedback, fine-tune your approach, identify what areas you're strong in, identify areas where you might need to improve. It's absolutely crucial. And one last element that we will need to focus on very much is that the SPL is, again, quite a large syllabus for one subject. So pre-reading, which has always been a thing we have, requested that students would do before certain lectures, that is probably going to be more essential for the SPL than it ever was for the likes of P1 and P3, because there is a lot of theory that you have to try and absorb, and if you don't absorb that properly, well then you're going to be a little bit lost in the lecture in terms of not being able to apply it to the questions as they apply. Okay, so I hope that has answered a lot of the questions that certainly I have received from students and many of my colleagues who are tutoring maybe students particularly at the F levels, and they're looking into now going and doing the SPL in the near future. You can keep up to date with any developments by, for example, emailing me at shane.o'grady@accountancyschool.ie. So if you have any questions or queries, please send them my way, and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. And we will then maybe probably incorporate some of those questions into any updates that we do over the next couple of months. It might also be a good idea for you to bookmark the SBL page on the Accountancy School website, and that's where you might find some updates over the next couple of months. So thanks for your attention. I hope you found that useful.